Christ and Messiah are not just religious terms, they're not just titles. So I'm the curious Christian, I'm a former mythicist who looks at the claims of mythicists. So when we see these terms Christ and Messiah, we often think of them in a religious sense because for a large part, that is what they mean today. That is their definition today, but that's not what they always really referred to. Now, there's actually a larger problem here because often when we look at ancient Greek, we often look at it through a Christian lens. That often means when people are looking up these terms through a lexicon, often they're looking at the terms through a Christian perspective, as those lexicons usually tend to focus on Christian literature. They're not generally using a larger lexicon in order to look at these terms. For instance, when we look at the BDAG lexicon, the primary definition for Christ really refers to Jesus. That's really how it's kind of being applied to within Christian doctrine or in Christian literature. But when we look at the Little Scott lexicon, which kind of looks at ancient Greek as a whole, we see other terms that can be used for Christ, such as ointment or salve. This is why when we look at Josephus' Book 8 of Antiquities, we can actually see the term Christ being used in reference to a plastered wall. Now, this is important because unlike today, when someone heard the term Christ within the first century, the idea of the Messiah isn't the only thing that would have came to mind. So, when a Greek reader of the Antiquities, because that is the audience that Josephus was writing this to, when they saw Jesus, who was called Christ, their first impression wouldn't have necessarily been that, well, this Jesus was also called the Messiah, that he was some type of savior figure within Judaism. Instead, it's very likely that they would have seen the term Christ, would have assumed that it's just some type of nickname because that is often what Josephus does, and just been fine with that. There's no need to explain what this term meant, it was simply a nickname. And we know that Josephus works in this manner because also in Book 20, where we see this idea of Jesus who was called Christ, we see another individual, a Joseph, who was called Cabo. And again, we have no idea what Cabo means. We're never given an explanation as to why he's named this, but what we are told is that this individual had this nickname that he was also called by. So, putting this all together, when we see Josephus saying that Jesus was called Christ, it's not saying that Jesus was seen as the Messiah or that he was seen as an anointed one or anything like that. It's simply saying that some people called this specific Jesus Christ. Christ as in a nickname. That is really it.